Hello, this is Flora speaking out again, sharing thoughts. And thank you for coming. And I want you to know I do appreciate so much your thoughts and replies sent back to me. Whether we agree or not is not nearly as important as the fact we are speaking out loud our thoughts. And to keep doors of communication open is such a vital necessity for a democracy. So thank you. Exactly 81 years ago today, the news was beginning to come on early morning radio news broadcasts that finally the fleet had left the shores of Great Britain and were sailing, knowing they'd be under heavy barrage, to France. We'd been waiting for this for a long, long time. And those ships full of American soldiers, British, Canadian, who were on their way to deliver Europe that had been cannibalized by the Nazis and fascist forces. I remember that day so well. There was a hush in the streets, almost like what we experienced many years later on 9/11 when the great towers fell. Except this was a hush of anticipation, hope, joy, prayer. The churches all over town and all over the nation were open that day, all day, at the request of President Roosevelt. So people could go when they could to pray in silence, which millions of us did. I read recently that the number of Americans killed in that great force that first day, 81 years ago, were 2,501 soldiers. 2,501. I got to thinking about that one, why they included that one instead of just giving a round number. He might have been just 18, 2 years older than I was. I was nearly 16. And he did not live to see the tremendous changes for good in the 80 years coming up. Probably none of those warriors would live to see the steps backward we're having now. I was also thinking this was perhaps one of America's finest hours on its way of liberation. And what a contrast to yesterday's disgraceful and humiliating show in front of the world, when two of the, you might say, Tyrannosauri Rex in the Jurassic Park, which is our administration, were battling it out with claw, teeth, and roars. Trump and Musk, terrified over losing their prestige and their power and their money, clawing at each other. What a contrast. In the meantime, the quieter cruelties have continued. Would-be dictators and certain types of politicians have always known the best way to control a country is to turn the groups of a nation against each other. That's an old political weapon. Now, hate means two different things. One is the hot personal bitterness and resentment. The other one relates more to the roots of the word hate, which doesn't necessarily mean individual rage, but means total separation, breaking off communication, segregation. That's the roots of the word hate. I first was exposed to segregation. I don't remember when I first began noticing across the street from where we lived near the edge of town and a university town, a big stately house with a lovely hill for coasting down in winter snows. Later, I learned that was known as the Jewish fraternity. And that seemed, to my child's mind, natural enough. People hang out with people who share their beliefs. So I guess I thought Jews chose to hang out. I didn't learn until later they didn't have a choice. No other fraternity would take them. Those are the times when universities and many other institutions had quotas. They wouldn't take too many of one particular group, because then the college might be known as a black college, a Jewish college, a woman's college, whatever you want. Quotas were quite prevalent then. Of course, segregation goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. I didn't know until much later that President Coolidge, under whose administration I was born, at one point refused any Asian whatever from entering the nation. I don't know how long that lasted. I didn't know that 2 years before I was born, I learned it later, the Ku Klux Klan marched in proud parade, 10 abreast, I think it was, down Pennsylvania Avenue of Washington, being cheered on both sides. I didn't know also till later that around 1940, before we'd entered the war, I think it was 2 boatloads of Jewish refugees fleeing from Germany were turned back from American soil. I didn't know those things till later. I did notice in high school, a small one, there was only one black student. He seemed just like the rest of us, except for his color. Wasn't a genius nor a loser, well-liked. But he didn't turn up for I heard later, for the junior senior proms, because he knew no white girl would dance with him, let alone go on a date with him. Things had improved a little bit, but not much, about 6 years later when I was a senior in college. And I was a 4-year member of a wonderful folk dance group where everybody danced with everybody, open to the whole university. And I remember a friend of my mother dropped in one evening to watch us dancing. I was doing the Polish dance, the hombo, a dance I adored, very, very tricky footwork. And I noticed she left after that dance, and I heard later from my mother, she rushed off to a public phone, of course no cell phones back then, called my mother and said, "Lou, I ought to be the first to tell you before anyone else does. Flora, I was at the dance group tonight. Flora was dancing with a black man." And my mother, being who she was, said, "Oh, Marge, what fun to watch the dancing. I hope the young people got their footwork good, straight. Those international folk dances can be very complicated." A grimmer example, when I was in professional work in a big city, working mainly in a community of immigrants, my coworkers and I were cornered by a group of realtors who were urging us to contact all our clients and professional coworkers to urge the people never to sell to Black people. Well, we told them, I'm glad to say, firmly, I hope politely, where they could go. It was white supremacy everywhere, like an ocean. We weren't, most of us, at least I wasn't, learning it from our parents or our classroom or our churches. But once you were out there, it was everywhere. Until I was in my 30s, or at least mid-20s, I never met a Black doctor, a Black lawyer, a Black professor, or a Black judge. It would have been inconceivable that we would ever have a Black president, or a woman for that matter of mixed race running for president, or Black and Jewish and gay people as governors, and one open gay man serving in the president's cabinet. That was science fiction. That could never happen, we thought back then. But now we're taking steps back. Again, nothing new in states back, but the focus changes on whom we are supposed to hate, or of whom to be suspicious, or of whom to segregate, or of whom to forbid the nation. In Donald Trump's first term, it was Muslims. Remember, early in his administration, he tried to ban all Muslims from coming to the country. That didn't last long. Now he's revoked the visas of Chinese students across the board. But the worst villain, apparently, are now the Hispanic nations. As Trump described them in his first administration, and again recently, there are millions of hordes of criminals, murderers, rapists, pouring through our gates, ready to destroy our cities and our way of life. These descendants of the great empires of Spain, Portugal, and the indigenous Indians, their empires, now they're the ones we are supposed to hate. I'm not talking now about borders. We need them. We need sensible guidelines for who enters the country, obviously. But we are now using Nazi tactics. I don't know what they are training these ICE agents, how they're training them. Do they know anything about habeas corpus? Do they know anything about the Constitution? They hide their faces. They are now allowed to come into homes, churches, court buildings just before the trial's underway, stores, everywhere. In a recent newspaper article from a city that I love and know well, this is what they said about a recent ICE raid incursion on a restaurant. Without warning, heavily armed agents handcuffed employees, pushed the manager against a wall, used flashbang grenades on members of the community, turned a peaceful dining establishment into a scene of fear, confusion, and trauma. These raids in the community do not target terrorists or violent criminals. They target workers, neighbors, family members, people trying to earn a living, contribute to a city they call home. It was not about public safety. It was a show of force meant to sow fear among the immigrants and the people who care about them, and to send a message to everyone who disagrees with the policies of an administration that will accept no dissent. It was not an operation in public safety. It was an exercise of intimidation. I think we need a new moral political D-Day. Fortunately, our eyes are open. We ask questions now, far more aware than we were 81 years ago. And once our awareness has been alerted, our eyes are open, there's no really going back. We may take steps back, fall asleep, but we will not permanently forget. And that is why I say this is a hard, painful time to be alive, but a glorious time to be alive. Let's keep the doors open to one another and keep aware, alert. Thank you for coming. See you next week.